after the last Holocaust, it was really nice. The professor actually encouraged me to take a little time to speak about my passion. And it seems like it's a big deal for women to speak at Muslim organizations, and clearly that's not the case here at the Usuli Institute. The professor has said a lot about women are just an amazing force that if you exclude them, that's half the population that you're not benefiting from. And certainly in our work, we've met so many Muslim women heroes that we would love to have weigh in and be part of our conversation on everything going forward. So I'm sort of grateful that I have the opportunity to just say a couple of things, because for me, my passion is converts and the whole conversion process. And I think, I'm not a scholar, but I can speak from experience. And I think it's important for Muslims who have not gone through that experience to know a little bit more about what it actually takes in this day and age to become a convert. And it's important because converts are really our future and our lifeblood. And I think that they're an opportunity, they represent a window of opportunity both for the individual and for the community. So I want to start by sharing sort of one of my favorite stories, which is I mentioned last time that I converted before I met the professor. And so one of my favorite stories is actually when I was calling him to see if he was teaching classes, because I was so impressed by what I was hearing. I called him and I said, well, I'm a convert to Islam, and I am wondering if you are teaching any classes, and so sent me your lecture tapes. So one of the first things he said to me is, well, if you are trying to impress me by telling me that you're a convert to Islam, I'm not impressed. Because people today who convert to Islam, they're either brilliant or they're insane. So I told him, well, I hope that I'm the former, not the latter. But I think it takes a little bit of both, quite frankly. It takes a little bit of brilliance, a little bit of insanity. But I think, so that was one of my favorite stories. Another favorite story, and I think the professor might have mentioned this before, is that early on, actually before we knew each other, he was invited to a conference at one of the major organizations. It was ICNA or ISNA, and speaking to a crowd of 100 to 200 people. And the first thing he asked is, okay, how many of you in the audience are converts? And maybe a handful of people raised their hands. So he said, okay, well, this is an indication of our failure as Muslims. And I think that he really got the organizers so upset about that comment that he was promptly uninvited and not ever invited again. But the truth of the matter is that converts are our lifeblood. They bring something very special, I think, especially here in America, because I know when I came to the faith, I really didn't have any baggage whatsoever. I think that, when you are searching for meaning, and I think everyone reaches that point in their life when they really start to question, what is my purpose here, and what is my belief system, what's going to happen to me after I die. Usually, people come to that point in their lives from a crisis. And we have to be honest, and I think here in America, it's really difficult to even imagine that Islam could be an answer to any of those questions for you, especially if you grew up here in this country and you're not from an Arab family. I had, in my situation, my parents were immigrants from Taiwan, and they came here in search of the American dream. So for them, very much, they were looking for success, by assimilating into white culture. And their success was really measured by material terms and financial rewards, and having a nice place to live, giving your kids the right education, and all of that. And so that was how I was raised, very much according to American values. I grew up in Palo Alto, California, a very nice suburb of San Francisco, and went to Berkeley as an undergrad. And because I was raised sort of with this idea that the white race was sort of superior, I was sort of disconnected also from my own cultural tradition. So everything kind of came to a head for me when I went to business school at Cornell. because now I was surrounded by a lot of really smart people that were really interested in, how to get the best job, how to make the most money, and you really start questioning, is this really the point of life? Do we really just want to make as much money as we can, and then that's it. Whoever dies with the most toys wins. And for me, I think having lived and being raised with a lot of these sort of material American values, that was really not enough for me. And I made enough bad decisions based on that whole worldview that I was open to something else. But then to get from that to the idea of Islam is quite a step. It's very scary, And for me, I started out with the belief in God. So I knew, okay, I'm either Jewish, I'm Christian, or I'm Muslim. I didn't think I was Jewish because I wasn't born Jewish. I wasn't chosen. And I believed in Christianity and Islam as a faith. But Christianity presented a challenge for me with Trinity because it didn't make sense to me. And I felt that if nothing else, my God is logical and would expect me to believe something that makes sense. So that was hard for me. So then to get from there and say, okay, well, so maybe I'm a Muslim. But the idea of that was so scary at so many levels. And this was even pre-9/11. So you can imagine how much harder it is for people today with how scary things have become to even consider that Islam could be a solution or an answer to anything. So there are a lot of, the point of this really is that to understand what it takes for someone to go from kind of a classic American upbringing to even start thinking about Islam as a possibility is really difficult because you start with your own self-perception. Like, could I even recognize myself as a Muslim? And for me, quite frankly, the answer was no. And it took about 2.5 years to even arrive at the idea that I could think about converting. And if you think about, it's like climbing a mountain. You take some steps and you learn a little bit more, and you start to undo the perceptions that you have built up over time from the media or from your family or whatever. So, that's a hurdle. Like I sort of see this, the conversion process happening in stages. So the first part is kind of your own coming to terms yourself with that possibility. But then once you kind of learn enough, and it really is from knowledge that empowers you to keep moving, and this message that kind of speaks to your heart that you start not being able to really ignore. You kind of reach a phase where you start thinking, well, maybe it is a possibility. But then you start thinking about your family, and you start thinking about your friends, and you start thinking about all the things that are comfortable to you that you might have to give up because you really don't know, and you have to ask yourself, am I willing to give up all of these things to become Muslim? And that's a process. And you can't really talk to any about it because people really don't understand what you're going through. Then, to even get to the point where it's like, okay, I'll make the decision and convert, that's a serious climb. So, it's, hopefully, in the future we can talk about other stages. Because I really do see there's sort of 4 steps involved in this whole, conversion. The first thing is sort of your being open to the idea of Islam is sort of number 1. Then number 2 is actually converting. And then number 3, confronting the reality of, okay, what have I done, and who's my community, and what have I sacrificed? Because a lot of people sacrifice a lot, for me, I actually, after converting, I was cut off from my family for 8 years. And it was because they were not willing to accept my decision, and I was not willing to let it go. So we were at an impasse. For them coming at the idea that, holy cow, we sacrificed so much to come to America. We wanted to give you all of these opportunities. And what have you done? You've gone backwards. You've joined a cult. You want to be oppressed as a woman. And so that's really hard because you have to either defend yourself or explain it. They're not going to understand. Or you just have to find a way to be strong with that. And so there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into reaching that point. And I think that that's what I really want to convey to Muslims, people who were born with this faith. Because oftentimes when you come and you say, I'm a convert, the first thing you get is, mashallah, wonderful, this is such a gift, you're special. And then the next thing you get is sort of silence. Because I think people feel uncomfortable or they don't know. And then the third thing is people assume you don't know anything. And they haven't thought, listen, I have had to overcome my own perceptions, my family's perceptions. All of this had to be from knowledge, prayer, reflection, and decision making. That this is so important to me that I'm willing to sacrifice what my friends, my parents, my extended family think. And if you ask yourself as someone who's born into Islam, are you willing to make those sacrifices for this faith? I think that helps to give you a little bit of sense of what it takes for converts to arrive here. And I think that it's important to recognize that oftentimes maybe converts know more in terms of knowledge than born Muslims. But the thing that they don't have, when I came into, when I converted, I sort of naturally assumed that all Muslims knew everything and that they were all faithful. Because for me, it was like, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for my entire life. And I didn't even know, I went to school with a woman who wore hijab, and I used to run away from her, stay away from her like the plague, because I thought, my God, that's crazy. Who would do that? And then when I converted and I saw her at my 10-year high school reunion, I was like, holy cow, you knew the secret that I was searching for my entire life. But it was, it was not what I was really shocked once I actually started to meet other Muslims. And, I think people don't really appreciate the process of what you go through and then assume that you know less than you know. But for people, I think the other part of it is that I just want to convey, and I'm sorry to take so much time, but the thing that is really important that converts bring, especially here in America, is if you come at it from theology and you're coming without, your baggage, you have a certain purity. You've fallen in love with the faith because you love the message. You love whether it's the message of equality, justice, what happens to you, after you die. There's a logic and there's a beauty to it. And that, I think, is something that Muslims, born Muslims, really need to tap into, because it's kind of like when you're a baby and how we say that, you're the closest to God at that point because you haven't been affected by the different experiences that you have as you get older. I think that applies for converts as well. And that's an opportunity, a window of opportunity for the community to embrace someone with that. And, if you think about the qualities that it takes for someone to convert, being able to see truth despite adversity and questioning and doing the hard work to learn enough to overcome your own reservations, being able to stand up to your family and sacrifice for what you believe in and being passionate. It's like being one of the first Muslims. These are the people that we want in our faith to be the new blood for us moving forward. So anything that I think, born Muslims can do to understand that experience is helpful in, increasing empathy. And then the other part is, not to say that born Muslims, obviously there are a lot harder challenges, I think, when you're born, because you have to sort of separate out culture from faith and kind of, figure out your way with the baggage. You have to kind of release the baggage. But the thing that's really beautiful that I experienced as a convert was that sense of being part of a collective. Because in America, you are very much raised as looking out for number one. And I think that there's a balance and a coming together that can be very beautiful. And I think part of the Usuli Institute is helping converts find their way and establishing, establishing what is necessary to be strong in this environment, bringing the beauty of the Islamic message to the native values of America. And then on the other side of it, helping born Muslims rediscover that beauty and letting go of some of the baggage that I think was not intended to come with the message. So anyway, food for thought, and thank you for allowing me the time.